there is, well, it's not really a question. It's actually a comment on one of my non-duality videos, where I talk about different levels of consciousness. So the comment is, consciousness has no levels. To think that is pure ignorance. That makes consciousness a concept, something with properties, with layers. Those layers can be real in a form of conditioning, attachment to belief systems, and all attainments, i.e. the ego. Okay, so I understand where this comment is coming from, because there are some of these teachings on non-duality that talks about this. And it again goes back to this, there is a pure consciousness and a separate consciousness. It's the old saying, only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion. So what these non-dual teachers have said is that only that which is undifferentiated, has no form, is real. And the entire world that has form, that is differentiated, that is expressed, that is ultimately an illusion. I've commented on this in several videos, but I'll give a brief summary here. But I'll focus on this idea, does consciousness have levels? And, you know, whatever teaching we have that's expressed in words is meant to explain something and answer certain questions, right? So if you say that consciousness has no levels, how do you explain Auschwitz? Seriously. I grew up in Denmark. I learned about the Holocaust, the concentration camps, and I still see it as one of the greatest examples, not greatest, but one of the worst examples of evil on the planet. How do you explain that people could do this to other people? And how do you explain that the vast majority of people on the planet wouldn't do this to other people? The only explanation I can see is that consciousness does have levels. Now, I understand there are some non-duality or spiritual teachers that will say everything is consciousness. And if you take my video on how the world was created, I agree, everything is ultimately consciousness, but everything is out of the Creator's consciousness. But the Creator created self-aware extensions of itself and gave them us free will. And we were not created, we were deliberately not created with the same consciousness that the Creator has, where the Creator is aware of everything all at once. We were created with a localized sense of self, very focused on ourselves and whatever environment we were first put in. And the purpose is that we start with that localized sense of self, we gradually expand that sense of self until we reach the Creator consciousness. This is what's missing from all Eastern spirituality that I've come across and most non-duality teachings. The higher purpose of life is the transcendence of self, the expansion of consciousness. Because by starting with a localized awareness and gradually expanding our awareness to the Creator level, we gain a whole different appreciation for the Creator's consciousness than we could do if we were just created at that level and hadn't experienced the journey towards it through different layers. So in other words, the Creator has created layers or levels of consciousness, ranging from its own level through these previous spheres that I have talked about in my How the World Was Created video, and out down to our level. The Creator has, out of its consciousness, created all of these layers that make up the world of form, which is more than just the physical. And so, how do we expand our sense of self? By rising towards higher and higher levels of consciousness. But on Earth, we have a special consideration because it's a very dense planet, and it's a non-natural planet, which means that people have the option to go into what I call the consciousness of separation. So the way I've explained this is that on planet Earth, there are 144 distinct levels of consciousness that people can be at. And we start out our journey on Earth at the 48th level, where we have some sense of connection to our higher self. But if we go below the 48th level, we go into an illusion that we are separate beings. And this is what we use the duality consciousness to create that illusion and maintain it. That's what I explain in my non-duality videos, that you can't grasp non-duality if you don't understand the duality consciousness. So once you go below the 48th level, you can keep going to lower and lower states of consciousness where you're more and more focused on yourself, and you come to believe that the ends can justify the means. And that's why people who are at the lowest level of consciousness, like Hitler, they can precipitate Auschwitz or other atrocities, because they are totally focused on themselves as separate beings, have no sense of connection to other people. Other people are just tools for them, means nothing. And then you take a person like the Buddha or Jesus that are clearly not in the same state of mind. They are clearly at a much higher level because they are closer to what I call the 144th level of consciousness, where you have overcome all selfishness. You don't see yourself as separate. You realize you are a connected being. You're connected to the one mind, Christ mind, Buddha nature. And so, just to explain what we see around us on Earth, to me the most logical explanation is there are levels of consciousness. And people can choose with their free will what level of consciousness they are at. And this, the level of consciousness they are at determines their actions. The lower the consciousness, the more selfish they are. So to me, that's just the only logical explanation for what we observe on Earth. And then, of course, you also have the teachings from the Ascended Masters about how the world was created in these, denser and denser spheres that represent that you go further and further away from the Creator consciousness before you start the return journey. And, to say that because ultimately only Brahman is real, anything that's differentiated is unreal, and therefore, since consciousness is the underlying reality, consciousness can't have levels. To me, it just doesn't explain what I just said. It doesn't explain what we see. It doesn't explain how reality came to be. Because what's the purpose of all this differentiation we see? I mean, we see enormous differentiation, not only in the physical universe, but in the spiritual realm. Enormous differentiation. And where did it come from? If there's only one consciousness and it can't be divided. The original saying is, only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion, the world is Brahman. Because Brahman manifested itself as the world. So it's actually not correct that anything other than Brahman is duality, as I say in my non-duality videos. The duality consciousness make us think that which is differentiated is different from Brahman. In other words, the duality consciousness make us think that God is not here, that is not created out of God's consciousness. The world is separate from God, and we are separate from God, as long as we see ourselves as differentiated beings. So in reality, this idea that there's consciousness is the underlying reality and consciousness can't have layers because then it wouldn't be real, that is actually a dualistic idea that is projected from the separate mind. And in order to overcome it, we have to rise to the higher level where we see that, yes, ultimately there is the Creator, but the Creator has expressed itself as all of these differentiated forms, but also expressed itself as the self-aware extensions of itself. And it's not that we are unreal. We are created as real beings who have the potential to raise our awareness, transcend our sense of self, raise our level of consciousness, expand our consciousness, however you want to put words on it, until we can fully appreciate the Creator's being and the Creator's creation. That's our role. And therefore, we are not unreal. We are just growing beings. We're not growing towards non-existence. We are growing towards the fullest existence we can have in this world of form we are in.